With me now to cut through the politics is Alexander Betts. He's the director of the Refugee Studies Centre at Oxford University. Professor, welcome to the programme.
Thank you very much.
We shortly should hear what Europe has decided. But what can they do and what should they do?
Well, they've been having a meeting in Brussels today that builds on an earlier meeting this week in Luxembourg. And really, the focus of that meeting seems to have been very much on smashing the gangs of smugglers and traffickers. The problem is I see that as a misdiagnosis of the problem. It's quite a misunderstanding. Yes, smugglers are involved, but smugglers don't cause migration. They respond to an underlying demand. And so I think people need to recognise the larger context of this.
So the larger context, as many people say, is you've got to fix the point of origin, fix the conditions that force these people out of their countries. But what about saving lives? I mean, the only reason the politicians are in Brussels today, having turned back the very successful search and rescue mission, is because of boatloads drowning. What must they do right now? Reinstitute search and rescue?
They need to immediately reinstitute search and rescue along the lines of the scheme under Mare Nostrum that was in place until November 2014. It saved over 100,000 lives last year. And the problem is, what they're proposing today in Brussels is to reinforce the existing scheme, Operation Triton. But the head of the European Border Security Agency, Frontex, has himself come out and said Frontex doesn't have a mandate to do this, and Operation Triton doesn't have the capacity to do search and rescue at that level.
Yeah, because Triton is just a border control operation. Let me play for you what David Cameron said about what they want to do. And let's not forget that British politics, maybe other European politics, are being pushed and pulled by anti-immigrant sentiment. This is what he said after saying that he's going to send a warship and a couple of other parts of military hardware to the Mediterranean.
Of course, under the right conditions, and that must include that people that we pick up and people we deal with are taken to the nearest safe country, most likely Italy, and don't have immediate recourse to claim asylum in the UK. Look, when these tragedies happen, Britain is always there, and this time will be no exception.
So, Professor, it's another case of not in my backyard. Yeah, we'll try to help, but for goodness sake, we won't bring them here. The UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights has said, actually, all the rich European countries should take in a lot of people. What must Europe do? What can it do?
The solution has to be found in international cooperation. Protecting refugees, and many of these people are refugees from countries like Syria, Eritrea, Somalia. They're fleeing vulnerability and persecution. What we need is to recognise a shared responsibility. At the moment, no one in Europe wants to increase the number of refugees they take, but there are 3 million Syrian refugees in the world. Most of them are in Turkey, Lebanon and Jordan. We have to resettle more to Europe. The number resettled to the UK is dismally low.
What would happen if they came here? As you see this very populist sort of anti-immigrant sentiment in quite a lot of countries. It's ugly. Some people call it xenophobic. But others say, actually, we might be able to have and need these migrants. They could actually be contributing to the strength of our economy rather than the opposite.
We need courageous political leadership to articulate to the public the difference between refugees and other categories of migrant. Refugees need and deserve our protection, and they contribute often to the economy. In research we've done in Oxford, based in Africa, we've been able to show that refugees under the right conditions can contribute to the economy. They're often entrepreneurs, they often have skills, talents and aspirations. But the policy framework enables or constrains that as a possibility.
What about this other thing? You heard what Prime Minister Cameron says, and others are saying it now. Let's smash the smugglers. So, first and foremost, destroy the boats. On the Libyan shores, maybe. But the Libyan authorities who are in charge of those shores say, no, not without our permission. Is that a good idea, smashing the boats?
It's a very militarised approach to the problem, and I think we need to realise that it won't address the underlying causes.
But it might stop some of these smugglers using those boats again.
What it will do is prevent them using those boats, but it won't destroy the industry. It'll mean poorer quality boats come onto the market, the prices will rise, more people will be exploited, and probably more people's lives will be jeopardised. So I think, yes, we can take action against smugglers, but we've got to recognise that, like a war on drugs, you might tinker with the conditions of demand and supply and the price, but you won't get rid of it unless you address the underlying demand conditions.
Well, again, how to attack this epidemic of crime, really. The piracy epidemic off the Horn of Africa was dealt with a joint task force. The head of the IOM, the International Organization for Migration, said that kind of operation needs to be put in place to stop these traffickers. Is that possible, even?
I think the piracy initiative in the Gulf of Aden in response to Somalis was very effective, but it was a different context. It was about criminality. It was about piracy. This is quite different. This is about an underlying displacement crisis around the world where refugees and desperate people are coming. And even if we take a militaristic response, it won't make the smugglers go away because the demand conditions will still be there and people will continue to try to come because they have very little alternative.